notary stopped mid-sentence. She looked up from the document in her hands, slowly, the way people do when they're not sure they read something right. Then she looked at my brother, then at my mother, then back down at the paper. Nobody in that room knew what to say. I did. But I stayed quiet. My father passed on a Tuesday in late October. The leaves outside his bedroom window had gone full orange by then, the kind of color that looks almost fake, like someone painted it. He'd asked me to open the blinds that last week, even though the light hurt his eyes. He said he wanted to see it one more time. I was there. My brother wasn't. That's not a complaint. It's just a fact. The kind that matters later. His name was Warren. My brother, 4 years older than me, broad-shouldered, confident in rooms the way I never was, or at least never appeared to be. He had my father's laugh and my mother's talent for making you feel like you were always one step behind in a conversation you didn't know you'd started. My name is Iris. I'm 31. I spent 6 years working for a federal contractor in logistics coordination before transitioning to a position I can't discuss in detail. What I can say is that I hold a security clearance and that my work has taken me to places I can't name on any form that isn't classified. My family thought I worked in government paperwork. My mother used to say it at dinner parties. Iris does something with government forms. Very boring, very Iris. She'd smile when she said it, the kind of smile that's supposed to take the sting out but doesn't. My brother would nod along. Yeah, she's not really the ambitious one, said as though I wasn't sitting 3 feet away. I used to go quiet when they did that, not because I didn't have anything to say, because the things I could have said weren't mine to say. That distinction matters. I want to be clear about it. My father had a house in Denton, Texas. Not a big house, 3 bedrooms, a detached garage he'd converted into a workshop, a back porch with a broken screen door he'd been meaning to fix for 11 years. There was a pecan tree in the side yard that dropped more nuts than any of us could ever use, and a storm cellar under the garage that smelled like old motor oil and rust. He'd bought that house with my mother in 1987 and they divorced in 2004, but he never sold it. He said it was the one place that still felt like his. I understood that. After the divorce, my mother moved to a condo in Frisco with new furniture and new paint and a life that looked very curated from the outside. Warren stayed close to her. I stayed close to her. I stayed close to my father. Not because my mother was a bad person. She wasn't. She had a way of organizing people into categories, and once you were in a category, that was it. You were fixed there. I had been fixed in the disappointment category sometime around my junior year of high school, when I turned down a scholarship to SMU to take a different path I wasn't able to explain to her satisfaction. My father never asked me to explain. He just said, "You know what you're doing, Iris," and handed me a cup of coffee, and that was that. He left me the house. I found out on a Wednesday, 3 weeks after the funeral. The attorney handling his estate, a man named Patterson out of Denton, called me directly. He said my father had updated his will 14 months before he passed. The house, the workshop, all contents, and the small savings account. Mine. There was a separate fund set aside for Warren, enough to cover his truck payment for 2 years and then some. But the house was mine. I thanked Mr. Term, Patterson, and hung up and sat in my car in a parking garage in a city I can't name for about 10 minutes, just listening to the concrete silence. Then I called my brother to tell him before he found out from someone else. He didn't take it well. The meeting was set for a Saturday, 3 weeks later, at the office of a notary in Denton named Miss Chandra Webb. She came recommended by Mr. Patterson as someone neutral who could facilitate the signing of the transfer documents. My mother didn't need to be there legally, but Warren had asked her to come and I hadn't objected. I should have known how it would go. I drove up from wherever I was stationed that week. A 6-hour drive, mostly highway, the Texas landscape going flat and brown and then flat and green again as I got closer to home. I wore what I always wear when I'm off duty: jeans, a plain shirt, my old canvas jacket, no jewelry except the watch my father gave me when I turned 25. My hair was up. My mother and Warren were already in the waiting room when I arrived. My mother had on a blazer. Warren was in slacks. They looked at me like I was underdressed for my own trial. Miss Mees. Webb's office was small. A round table, 4 chairs, a window that looked out on a parking lot. She had the documents laid out when we sat down, but before she could get through her opening remarks, my brother started. I want it on record that this will was changed under duress, he said. Miss Webb looked up. Mister, our father was ill. He wasn't in a state to make these decisions clearly. Warren, I said, you were always around him. You had access. That's not. I was around him because I was taking care of him. My mother put her hand on Warren's arm, but not to stop him, the way you steady someone before they throw a pitch. Iris, she said, with that particular softness that meant she was about to say something hard, your father loved you. Nobody is disputing that. But this house has been in this family for 37 years. Warren has a family, children. He has actual roots here. You live out of a suitcase doing whatever it is you do. You don't even have a permanent address. I have a permanent address. It's just not one I advertise. That's exactly what I mean. She shook her head. You've always been like this. Secretive. Closed off. Your father enabled it because he felt guilty, but that doesn't make it right. Guilty about what? She didn't answer that. Warren leaned forward. We're going to contest it. That's your right, I said. You don't seem concerned. I'm not. He looked at me the way he used to look at me when we were kids, and I wouldn't react the way he expected. Like my calm was a kind of insult. Of course you're not, he said. You drift through everything, Iris. You always have. You don't put down roots. You don't show up. You don't contribute. Dad left you this house because you were the one holding his hand at the end. And that's a beautiful thing, fine. But you don't have any use for it. You're going to sell it. You're going to take the money and disappear again. I'm not going to sell it. Then what are you going to do with it? You can't even commit to a zip code. My mother nodded. He's right. I hate to say it this plainly, Iris, but a home like this deserves someone who actually live in it. Make it a home. You've never been that kind of person. There was a silence. Ms. Webb had stopped looking at her documents. She was watching me. Are you finished? I asked. My brother spread his hands. I'm just saying what everyone's been thinking for years. What everyone's been thinking, I repeated. That you checked out of this family a long time ago. That you put whatever it is you do ahead of every relationship you've ever had. That Dad deserved better than a daughter who showed up for the last act. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the 14 months before my father died. The weekends I drove up when I was stateside. The appointments I sat through, the prescriptions I filled, the nights I slept in the recliner next to his bed because his breathing had gone uneven and I didn't want him to be alone. I thought about the conversation we'd had in June, the one where he'd asked me if I thought what I did mattered, and I'd said yes, and he'd said, then that's enough. I thought about all the things I couldn't say in a notary's office in Denton, Texas. Okay, I said, that's it. Okay, let's just sign the documents. Warren laughed, short, humorless. She wants to just sign the documents. Classic Iris. No explanation, no accountability, just sign and disappear. Ms. Webb cleared her throat. We all looked at her. She had the papers in her hands, but she wasn't looking at them. She was looking at the cover of a manila folder she'd opened, something separate from the estate documents. Her expression had gone careful and very still. Miss Iris, she said slowly, before we proceed, I want to make sure I have your information correct. She looked down at the folder. This is a routine identity verification for the property transfer. It comes up sometimes with federal employment records. She paused. Your employer of record is listed here as, she said the name of the agency quietly, almost to herself. My brother frowned. What does that mean? Ms. Webb looked up at him. It means, she said in a tone that was professionally neutral but had something underneath it, that your sister's employment history is not what I was expecting. She looked at me again. I want to make sure we're handling your information appropriately. There are specific protocols. I know, I said. Thank you. My mother looked between us. I don't understand. What's in that folder? Ms. Webb set it down carefully. I'm not in a position to share the details. I'll just say, she glanced at Warren. I would encourage everyone in this room to think carefully before pursuing a legal challenge to this estate. The process of discovery can bring a great deal to light. Sometimes things that people close to a situation might prefer to remain private. The room was quiet. My brother's face had changed. He looked like a man doing math he didn't want to finish. What are you saying? He asked. I'm saying, miss, Webb replied, folding her hands on the table, that I'd like to proceed with the scheduled signing if everyone is in agreement. Nobody spoke for a moment. My mother was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her before. Not the category sorting look. Not the dinner party voice. Something older than that. Something that might have been the beginning of a question she didn't know how to ask yet. Warren was still looking at the folder. What exactly, he said, do you do? I'd been asked that question 100 times in my life, and I had 100 different answers for different contexts. In airport security lines and at family barbecues and in the waiting rooms of hospitals where I'd sat with my father. I thought about giving him the standard answer, the one that ends conversations. But I looked at him, really looked at him, the way I hadn't in years, because it hurt too much to see how far we'd drifted. And I said something that was true without being classified. I make sure that people who are making decisions that affect a lot of lives have the right information to make them correctly. And when things go wrong, which they do, more often than anyone reports, I'm the one who goes in and figures out why. He stared at me. That's what I've been doing since I was 23 years old, I said. 6 days a week, sometimes 7, in conditions that I cannot describe to you, in places that do not appear on any itinerary, working alongside people who sacrifice more than I can explain in a notary's office in Denton on a Saturday morning. My mother's hand had moved off Warren's arm. It was resting on the table now, palm down, like she was steadying herself. Why didn't you ever? She started. Because I couldn't. Not because I didn't want to. We thought you were. I know what you thought. There was a long silence, the kind that has weight. Warren looked down at the table. He was quiet for a while, then he said, in a voice that was smaller than I'd ever heard from him, I told my kids their aunt worked in the cubicle somewhere doing data entry. I know. My daughter asked me once why you never talked about your job, and I told her you were probably embarrassed by it. Warren, I'm sorry. He said it like it surprised him, the words coming out before he decided to say them. I didn't know. I thought. He stopped, tried again. I've been walking around for 20 years thinking you were the one who checked out on all of us, that you didn't care enough to stay connected. And I built a whole story about who you were, and I never actually, he exhaled, I never actually asked. My mother was quiet. She was looking at her hands. I used to wonder, she said finally, why you never seemed hurt when I said things, at dinner parties. The things I said about your work, I thought it meant you didn't care what I thought. I cared, I said. I just couldn't defend myself with information I didn't have clearance to share. So I stayed quiet, and you read the quiet wrong. She looked up at me. I read a lot of things wrong. We signed the documents. Ms. Webb was professional and efficient and didn't add anything else to the conversation. Before we left, she shook my hand and held it for an extra beat, and she said, "Thank you for your service," in a voice quiet enough that only I heard it. I nodded. I said thank you. In the parking lot, the October air had gone cool, and the pecans were probably dropping in the yard on Whitmore Street. Warren stood by his truck and didn't get in right away. "Are you going to keep it?" he asked. "The house?" "Yes. What are you going to do with it?" "Fix the screen door first," I said. Dad kept meaning to and never got to it. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. "He always meant to," he said. "I know. I'm going to want," he said. I'm going to want," he paused. "I'd like to bring the kids sometime. If that's okay. They should know that house, know where they came from." "That's okay," I said. "That's more than okay." My mother was standing by her car. She looked older in the parking lot light than she did inside. Or maybe I was just looking at her differently. She didn't come over. But she held my gaze for a moment, and in that moment, something passed between us. Not exactly. Not yet, but the acknowledgement that something had calcified between us over years and years, and that maybe it didn't have to stay that way. She gave me a small nod. I gave her one back. Then she got in her car, and I got in mine. I drove to Whitmore Street before I left town. Sat in the driveway for a while with the engine off. The pecan tree had dropped a thin scatter of nuts among the side yard, and the workshop light was still on. I'd left it on the last time I was here and hadn't been back since. I went around to the back porch. The screen door was hanging off its upper hinge, the mesh torn at one corner where it had been catching on the frame for years. I stood there and looked at it for a long time. In my jacket pocket I had a small notepad, the kind I always carry. I wrote 2 things on it: the hardware store on Commerce Street, and a date. 4 weeks out, one of my next windows between assignments, when I could come back and do the work myself. My father had bought this house because it felt like his. He kept it because it was the place where things stayed, where he left them. I understood that now in a way I hadn't when I was young. When you spend your life moving through spaces that don't belong to you, doing work that can't be named, in the service of something too large to hold in a single conversation, you need one place that stays, one door that opens the same way every time, one yard where you know exactly what's growing. I pulled the screen door gently back into its frame and held it there, feeling the tension of the broken hinge under my palm. It was fixable. That was enough for today. I let it go carefully, got back in my car, and drove south toward the highway as the sun went low over the flat Texas horizon and the whole sky turned the color of the leaves my father had wanted to see one more time. I didn't leave because you failed. I left because the work required it. But I was coming back. I was always going to come back. I've thought a lot about what it costs to stay quiet, not the easy quiet, the kind where you have nothing to say, the hard kind. The kind where you have everything to say and the words are right there and you still can't use them. Because they don't belong to you alone. Because saying them would break something larger than the conversation you're having. For years, my mother thought my silence meant I didn't care. Warren thought it meant I was empty, that there was simply nothing underneath. No drive, no sacrifice, no substance. Just a woman who drifted, who kept no roots, who chose herself over family. And I let them think that. Not because I was indifferent to what they believed. Because the alternative was worse. You don't get to defend yourself with classified information in a family argument. You just take the version of yourself that other people build out of their assumptions, and you carry it, and you keep moving. What I've come to understand, slowly, the way you understand things that cost you something, is that the story people tell about you in your absence is almost never about you. It's about what they needed you to be. Warren needed me to be lesser so that the life he built could feel like more. My mother needed a category for me, because people without categories made her uncomfortable, and the category they chose, unreliable, closed off, the one who checked out, was the only shape they had available that fit the silence I couldn't break. That's not cruelty exactly. It's just what happens when people fill in gaps with fear instead of patience. What Chandra saw in that folder didn't change who I was. I was the same person who walked into that office as I was when I walked out, but it changed what my family was able to see. And that distinction between who you are and what others can see is something I've had to make peace with over a long time. The house on Whitmore Street is mine now, not because I fought for it, not because I proved anything, but because my father knew, even when no one else did, that I was present. Not in the ways that are easy to document, the birthday dinners, the group texts, the visible accumulation of family moments, but in the ways that mattered when it was 3 in the morning and his breathing had gone wrong, and someone needed to be there. Integrity doesn't announce itself. That's the thing nobody tells you when you're young. You don't get credit most of the time for the choices you make that no one witnesses. You make them anyway. You make them because the alternative is becoming someone who only does the right thing when someone is watching. And that person, I've met that person in many forms, in many places. That person is hollow in ways that eventually show. Warren is not a bad man. He just stopped asking questions about people he thought he already knew. That's a quiet kind of failure, the kind that builds up over years without anyone noticing until a stranger opens a folder in a small office and the whole architecture comes down at once. I'm going back to fix the screen door. I'll bring lumber from the hardware store on Commerce. I'll probably do it wrong the first time and have to redo it because I'm better at a lot of things than I am at carpentry. But I'll finish it. That's what I do. I finish things even when no one is watching, especially then.